I'm standing in Madison's doorway with my hand still on the vinyl of the violin case she just hurled across the hall, and the words come out of me like a stone thrown through glass. You're a failure, and it's no wonder nobody in this family wants or loves you. The sentence lands in the room and then hits a silence so thick I can hear the house settle, the rafters creak, and the thin radiator hiss like someone holding their breath. Her phone screen is a small blue square on the carpet, a paused playlist blinking at track 3, and the lacquer smell from the instrument hangs sharp in the air like the smell of a shop where things are fixed and never get fixed again. She's frozen with mascara streaked down one cheek and her eyes so wide I can see the white underneath the color, like she's trying to make herself bigger than what she feels. For a second she doesn't move, then bolts upstairs with a speed that scares me, slamming her bedroom door so hard the mirror in the hallway rattles against its frame and a sliver of dust falls from the ceiling. Lily stands in the kitchen doorway, half in and half out, eyes darting between me and Jessica, and the cold mug at Jessica's elbow has gone dull and useless on the table, steam long gone. I stand there feeling a clean, sharp relief in my chest and a slow, soft terror settling into my bones all at once. My name is Daniel Walker, I'm 52 years old, and that sentence isn't who I am, but it is what comes out when all the patience snaps. Jessica, who is 50, sits at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around that empty mug like it might hold the shape of the morning, and Lily, who is 14, is the kind of kid who used to be the peace in the house, quick to laugh, quick to hand you a Band-Aid without being asked. The home smells of coffee grounds gone bitter and the faint soap Jessica uses on the sink, and the vinyl floorboards feel cold under my soles, the late winter light cutting across them in hard parallel lines. This isn't a teenager's mood swing people talk about over drinks. It's a long wear-down that's been rolling like low thunder for 13 years. I remember Madison at 3, sitting in the doorway, and how a pair of shoes could set her off into a tantrum that lasted an hour. The kind that left Jessica and me trading looks like we were trying to remember how we had agreed to be parents. We tried everything that felt sane. Gentle coaching that sounded like hope sticker charts that turned into paper graves of broken promises. Small rewards that bought one calm afternoon and then nothing the next day. We tightened expectations slowly, not to become those cartoonish strict parents on TV, but because the softer ways seemed to get worn thin like old cloth. We moved from strategies into systems. Practice schedules taped to the fridge, negotiated bedtimes written in marker, weekends parceled into rehearsals and chores. There were moments when teachers said, "She's got something," and I would stand in a doorway and listen to Madison play like the whole house was being tuned. But talent didn't stop the cycles, it became another ledger of investment and disappointment. We paid for lessons, drove across town for recitals, and spent gas and time and money because music felt like the part of her that would anchor itself to something outside her rejections of us. The violin bow shivers in my hand if I close my fingers around the case now, a small echo of what used to make the house feel alive. The slammed door echoes like a punctuation mark on years of trying, and the sound of that single sentence has created a wall that neither of us had permission to build. I tell myself I said it because I was honest, because exhaustion makes truth sound like a weapon, but I feel the weight of what I said as something I can't take back with a mop or an apology that slides off. I used to love Madison without question. I would have carried her to the bus stop in a thunderstorm and thought it a small favor. Saying that I loved her was as natural as breathing in the early days when she would fall asleep with a book on her chest and I would read until my voice went dry. But the last several years have frayed that certainty into thin thread, and now when I think of the way I loved her, what's left feels knotted and worn. I can admit that in a way that hurts and also scares me, because admitting that love can fray means admitting that my line in the sand could be wrong, that the man who threw words like shrapnel might have just created a wound that won't heal. When I close my eyes, I go back to a dozen small wars that stacked into that morning like dry kindling, and the first one I see is Madison at 7, sitting stiff on a chipped bench in front of the upright piano we found at a garage sale and fixed up, refusing to touch the keys because the bench didn't feel right to her, arms folded and face red like she was daring us to make her. I can still smell the wax polish from that piano, see the gouge on the fallboard where someone once dropped a tool, and remember how Mr. Carter, her violin teacher later on, would tell us carefully, "She has an ear for phrasing. That's rare for her age," like he was giving us a map and we didn't know how to read it. At 9, she sat between us and the cello teacher, Mr. Alvarez, and started crying in the lesson when he praised the weight of her tone as if the praise was a foreign language she didn't deserve. At 11, she snapped at the host after a recital, said loud enough that people at the back turned, "I'm not playing for your applause," and refused to bow, then marched off stage like someone who took kindness as an insult. Ms. Reynolds, the piano teacher, would stand at the door and say, "She listens to detail, Daniel. You should hear the way she holds a line." And it felt like confirmations were always on our side, even when her behavior was not. We invested in this because talent felt like a promise. We bought a used violin for $420, the upright piano got refurbished, and we paid to have it tuned twice a year at about $150 a pop, and she had 8 seasons of weekly lessons at an average of $55 per lesson. There were summer masterclasses she scraped into, and 3 recital fees, all of it small bills and big silences. All said and done, we'd put about $6,400 into lessons, instruments, and recitals over the last 9 years, which is a lot for our family and more than a little of our hope wrapped in paper and receipts. The money was only half of it, the rest was hours behind the wheel. I can count the miles in stop-and-go traffic, the lunches eaten in school parking lots, the weekends rearranged around rehearsal schedules, the plans canceled because someone had to be at a warm-up room at 9 in the morning. I remember one Friday when Jessica was supposed to meet a client at a restaurant for a negotiation that could have changed a contract, and she told me at 7 p.m. she needed to go watch Madison play a duet at a small community hall across town. Jessica put on her jacket, left her salad half-eaten, and said, "I'll be 5 minutes late, I can't miss this." That detail is the kind of thread that makes the inventory of care mean something beyond money. And then there is Lily, my younger daughter, who sings in the school choir, picks up the flute in music class for fun, and shows up for family dinners like she understands a code we keep forgetting to teach Madison. Lily laughs easy, folds napkins without being told, and has that steady kind of affection that doesn't demand a receipt. Family pictures show the difference. Lily in a school concert smile, Madison in a studio portrait with a look like she's working out how not to belong. People who should know better start making quiet comparisons. One July barbecue crystallized everything. My brother stood by the grill with a beer and a sideways smile and said to Jessica, low enough that I could hear it and loud enough that Madison heard, "Why can't she be more like Lily?" The words rolled over the yard like a pebble in a pond. I felt my chest tighten like an old belt being cinched one notch too small. Jessica went quiet, and I felt in my ribs the small weight of years of patience compress into resentment. So the music, which had been the one place we could all point to and say, "Maybe this will hold," turned into the battleground. Every lesson, every recital, every compliment from a teacher started to mean something else. Proof she could do it if she chose to, proof she was squandering what we'd paid for, proof easier to wag a finger at than to untangle. That's how a private hope becomes public tension, and why, when the hallway filled with lacquer smell and a phone glow and I finally said that terrible sentence, it felt like the end of a ledger more than a moment of fury. The instruments that once bound us now sit like evidence. I told her casually, like I was asking for the salt, "Madison, could you play something for Grandpa?" And she looked at me like I'd asked her to hand over her heart. The rented hall smelled of charcoal and cheap bleach. The folding table sagged with potato salad and coleslaw in plastic tubs, and somewhere a cousin with a habit of a loud joke was setting down a paper plate with a grin that expected applause. There were 22 people there. Kids weaving between chairs, a grill hissing at the back, and the late afternoon light sliding through high windows in cold ribbons across the linoleum. She said no first, sharp and flat, like a hinge gone rusty, and then the room turned smaller. "You people are fake and so annoying," she said, loud enough that the joke on my cousin's lips died halfway to being funny. Forks hung in midair like little silver question marks, and the laugh that had been building in the other side of the room fizzled and stopped. Aunt Denise, who always holds a paper plate in one hand, froze with potato salad in the other like she'd been asked to choose between 2 religions. Grandpa Walter, Jessica's father, 78, Kane, leaning against his chair, leaned forward with his brows pinched and asked, gentle and confused, "What happened to you, Madison?" His voice had the surprised softness of a man who'd seen the world change too fast and was still trying to understand why his own family looked like strangers. Jessica's face flushed hot red. Shame and anger folded into one expression, and the paper mug she'd been holding began to crumple between her fingers. I felt my own face burn with a different heat, a dull, rolling humiliation that filled my throat and pressed at my sternum. My fingers dug into the plastic of the chair so hard it creaked once, a small, ugly sound that seemed to land louder than Madison's words. For a moment I wanted to shout back, to tell her she'd embarrassed more than herself, to remind her of lessons paid for and drives made and contracts rearranged. Instead, I felt a tug where my patience lived and another sharper pull where the years had stacked up like unpaid bills. The silence after her sentence was louder than any argument we'd had because now other people were witnesses, and witnesses were witnesses to who we were supposed to be. The rest of the afternoon hung awkwardly after that. People tried to eat their potato salad with smaller, glossier bites and conversations skittered like frightened birds. My brother made a joke about the weather, but his voice lacked its usual ease, and a cousin sidled up to me later and said, "Sorry man, that was rough," eyes showing the kind of pity I didn't know what to do with. Jessica left early under the pretense of helping Walter with his coat. She didn't return to the hall. Lily came over to me at the car and said nothing for a long time, just leaned against me like she needed the solidity of my shoulder. After that party, the tenor of our house changed in small, corrosive ways. Jessica started avoiding one-on-one talks where she had to correct Madison, as if the humiliation of that afternoon had removed her willingness to be the parent who made the hard calls. She began to leave the room when Madison got sharp, stepping away with the remote in her hand or taking her laptop to the bedroom, and the absence of her defense made the silence into its own weapon. In family gatherings, she would no longer jump into protective mode. Instead, she answered Madison's sarcasm with a cool, resigned silence that felt more like a ceasefire than a defense. I found myself shouldering more of the emotional labor, the hard conversations and the scheduling of things nobody wanted to manage. I took calls from teachers, explained missed rehearsals to parents of duet partners, and drove alone with the weight of explanations in my mouth like stones. Jessica's retreat was not dramatic so much as a slow folding away, a quiet that lived between rooms and pushed me forward into arguments I didn't want but that now seemed necessary. Those small withdrawals made me angrier in private, not at Madison alone but at the sense that the family's patience had been rationed until there was hardly any left. The barbecue did more than embarrass us. It moved the line where we kept our patience and told us without ceremony that some resources had been spent into deficiency. The next time Madison slammed a door, the slamming sounded different to me, less like a child's tantrum and more like a declaration of war. She corners me in the hallway out of nowhere, urgent and raw, like the air changed and pushed her into a narrow place where words had to come out. "I'm done," she says, voice clipped. "I want to quit the violin. Now." The hall light throws a strip down her face, her chin up like she's daring me to refuse, and the laundry basket at my feet smells faintly of detergent and cold sweat from the dryer. It's the kind of unplanned confrontation that makes my chest tighten, because you know what's coming and you also don't. I breathe slow and catalog quietly. I'd already let her stop piano 2 years ago as a peace offering to try and buy back some calm when school was falling apart for her, and that had cost us an afternoon of excuses and the weight of a choice that never fixed the rest. You stopped piano and things got better for a while, I say, keeping my voice even because the last thing I wanted was an escalation in our narrow hallway. She lifts a shoulder like it's a shrug of iron. "That was different," Madison snaps. "This is everything. I didn't ask for any of it." Her list comes at me crisp and practiced. "I never wanted lessons, it cost too much, the teacher is awful, the rehearsals are humiliating, the recitals are theater and she's not part of the crowd." "You don't get it," she says, teeth sharp. "I've been doing this because you wanted me to. It's not mine, Dad, it's yours." The words are simple and brutal, and for a second I taste the back of my tongue metallic with the feeling of being accused of steering her life for my own reasons. I answer with detail, not volume. Mr. Carter, Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Alvarez, they all said she had something. They called her phrasing mature, said her tone was rare for someone her age. I watch her face as I say their names, the way her jaw tightens at the memory of teachers' praise like it's coal she's carrying. I tell her out loud the numbers because they are both ledger and language to me. The used violin at $420, the regular tunings at $150 twice a year, 8 seasons of weekly lessons at about $55 each, the master classes and 3 recital fees. All told, about $6,400, Madison, I say slowly, feeling the arithmetic in my chest. She shrugs like the money is a thing someone else had to worry about. "That's your problem, not mine," she says, and it is said with the clean cruelty of someone who has practiced not caring until the thing she doesn't care about collapses into other people's hands. The shrug is a physical dismissal of everything Jessica rearranged, every weekend canceled, every client meeting she left early to watch a duet in a warm-up room. The shrug erases the miles of driving I'd done, the afternoons I'd taken off work to sit in a waiting room listening to other parents' soft applause. That line, her "that's your problem, not mine," is what finally presses the tension into something that breaks. I feel the pressure in my ribs like water boiling behind glass, the little inventory of favors and sacrifices becoming a list of ghosts. I am not yelling, I am not out of control. My voice goes steady and colder in a way I recognize, the voice I hear in the mirror when I've decided not to bargain anymore. "You're acting like a failure, Madison," I say, each word deliberate the way you chip at ice. "And that attitude is exactly why no one wants to be around you." The words land like a hammer in the hall. She doesn't cry or shout, she looks at me, a flash of hurt passing across her face and then the set of someone who has been cut and learned to move on. She turns and storms off as if she's trying to get somewhere far from the corridor where I stand with the detergent smell and the light slicing across my shoes. The slam of her bedroom door reverberates like a verdict and the apartment holds its breath. Jessica comes to the doorway without a word and gives a quiet nod that is less a signal of agreement than an exhausted acceptance, like she's been waiting for a moment to stop pretending this could be fixed with gentler words. Lily, who's been hovering nearby, looks at me with that small, frightened question in her voice. "Dad, did you mean it?" Her whisper makes the hallway shrink. My answer is silence first, because I can't trust a quick defense and then a small admission. I don't know if I meant it the way it sounded, and that uncertainty sits heavy in my throat. Relief and shame sit together in my chest like two people who don't belong on the same bench. I feel cleansed by saying what I have been thinking, and I feel sick with the memory of saying it. The moral line blurs there. I tell myself I gave fairness a last push, but a part of me watches Madison's retreat and wonders if I've pushed her off a cliff I couldn't imagine recovering from. There is no tidy answer. There is only the echo of my words and the knowledge that how I reacted will follow us longer than the heat of an argument. We sat in Dr. Harris's office like a jury deciding whether to convict ourselves, and Madison folded her arms so tight I thought she might snap in half. Her gaze fixed on a spot on the far wall, while the afternoon light cut a pale rectangle across the carpet. The therapist scanned her notes, then looked up at all of us and said in that overly calm way professionals have, "There's resistance to work here," and suggested family therapy because she thought the patterns were shared, built into our daily script. Madison answered with a single flat line, "There's nothing wrong with me," like a rehearsed slogan, and then stared at her phone the way other people pray. We tried the family sessions because Jessica and I kept hoping someone with a degree could point the way out of the loop. One session ended with Madison rolling her eyes so hard I worried her neck would hurt, and when asked to share a feeling, she sent a private text under the table that read, "Therapy is bullshit," and then laughed with a friend right after, while Jessica sat in the waiting room with her hands clenched so tight her knuckles shone. The therapist called it resistance and recommended more structured family work. What we got in practice was passive-aggressive comments across the dinner table and long silences that felt like wedge-shaped rooms. The practical rules we tried read like a list I kept on my phone: screen limits enforced, no devices during homework or meals, chores on a rotating chart with checkboxes, privileges withdrawn for missed rehearsals. I remember writing them out at midnight after a day of missed lessons, each rule feeling like a new hope and also a little like a bandage. The first week, Madison slammed doors until the hinges complained, sent guilt-tripping messages that accused me and Jessica of being controlling, and then went silent for 3 days. The charts would start pretty, with stickers and small rewards, and then dissolve into resentment where each unchecked box became a medal for wrongness. Lily learned to move like a cat around these storms, tiptoeing through the house with questions folded into whispers. "Is she mad again, Dad?" And sometimes letting the worry spill into tears when whatever argument had just happened landed on her like rain. Protecting both of them feels like a job with impossible hours. I try to be fair, but fairness has weight. I drive Lily to flute rehearsals, buy her hot chocolate after a long afternoon, and walk with her to a coffee shop when she needs to say things aloud to someone who isn't in the house. Those walks smell like syrup and warm winter air. They keep me human. I still sit on the bed sometimes and read aloud to both girls because that ritual once grounded us, the words ringing in the small dark rooms like promises. Madison began skipping those nights first, saying she had homework or was tired, and the book would stay open on my lap while Lily listened and then fell asleep curled like a comma. The small tendernesses matter. Jessica and I have tried to stack them against the avalanche of conflict, but tenderness is a fragile thing you have to keep putting down in the same place and hope it doesn't get trampled. Every new attempt at structure felt like a fresh roll of film developing, and each failed frame left us with fewer good snapshots. I logged accomplishments and failures in my notes app, dates of missed lessons, the time I drove to a recital and waited in the lobby for 30 minutes while she sat in the car texting, the nights I rearranged client calls to catch a rehearsal, and the list read less like a parenting plan and more like a ledger of small betrayals. Some nights I lie awake and add up the quiet moments we still have, like receipts, hoping they cover the debt of all the arguments. Jessica and I are not people who have stopped loving Madison. That claim would be both false and cruel. We are exhausted in a way that makes tender feelings thin and sharp like paper cut edges. Years of antagonism have worn our strategies down to habit, and exhausted strategies no longer change patterns, they just rearrange the furniture of our conflict. We keep trying because it would be easier not to, but trying has a cost that shows up in Lily's watchful face and in Jessica's shorter answers, and in the heavy silence that waits at the foot of Madison's closed bedroom door. My phone vibrates on the kitchen counter like a small animal, and when I pick it up it's Rebecca calling, and the sound of her voice jolts me because she never calls angry without a reason she's rehearsed. "Daniel, what did you tell her?" she asks before I can answer, words clipped and loud enough that Lily pokes her head in from the hallway because she heard the tone. I hear dishes clinking in the background of Rebecca's house like she's pretending normal, and then she lands the accusation. "You told a child she's unloved. Do you know what that does? That's emotional abuse, Dan. That's unforgivable." She's repeating what Madison has told her and what Madison has told friends, and the version is clean and brutal in a way family gossip always is, one line turned into a thesis. Rebecca's voice tightens and she says, "You don't get to make a kid leave because you're tired. You said she's unwanted. That's not parenting, that's harm." I try to give context, the long list of missed rehearsals and slamming doors and the way we rearranged our lives around lessons, but the connection doesn't hold over the wire. She keeps circling back to the quote. "How could you? Do you understand what that word does to someone?" Within an hour, the house is noisy in a new way. Messages coming in with small, sharp vibrations, cousins offering sympathy to Madison and some asking pointed questions. Antonice texts a gif of a mother holding a broken heart with a caption, "We'll always be here for Madison." And my cousin Mark privately messages me that he's rethinking if he should bring his kids to Thanksgiving because he doesn't want them around that kind of parenting. Another distant relative slips into my DMs with, "You need to do better, Daniel, kids remember." There's a voicemail Rebecca leaves that sits in my pocket like a hot stone. She cries a little on it, real ragged crying, and then says she can't be around the house for a while because it hurts to think Madison could be unloved by her own father. She suggests quietly and with a kind of certainty that chills me that Madison come stay with Rebecca's brother for a bit, get away from us. The suggestion is both practical and performative, like a way to show the world she's chosen a side. I find myself arguing back in texts, and then regretting it because the words look thin against a chorus that has an image to hang onto. I write long messages that include the history nobody else has seen. The 7-year-old refusing the garage sale piano, the 9-year-old crying as Mr. Alvarez praised her tone, the Saturday nights Jessica rearranged a work dinner to sit in a warm-up room for a duet. I list the money, the time, the $6,400 in lessons and gear like a defense against an accusation that ignores the ledger and the small kindnesses behind it. But the soundbite has power. The sentence that cut the hallway becomes the headline in other people's minds. When a cousin starts a group thread offering helpful suggestions about parenting books and fostering empathy, it reads less like concern and more like performance. The thread fills with clinical-sounding quotes and links to articles about toxicity in family systems, and the tone is one of moral clarity that leaves no room for messy context. I read the messages and feel that old tightening in my chest again. A mix of anger and a bruised, defensive explanation rising up that I don't bother to post. I could write a 10-paragraph answer about years of work and failed attempts in therapy rooms where Madison literally folded her arms and refused to engage. But I know soundbites win conversations, and narratives that fit tidy moral boxes travel faster than the inconvenient truth. Jessica shuts down incoming calls with a flat hand and then sits very still, the kind of quiet that used to be our small refuge now feeling like a shared wound. Lily watches everything like it's a play she wasn't cast in, eyes wide. The family is parsing loyalties into camps the way children divide halves of candy, and I find myself watching how people choose, as if loyalty is something to be weighed like a scale in the grocery store. I'm not interested in performing repentance on a stage for the cousins. I'm not willing to pretend the story is simpler than it is because I believe the truth is messy, layered, and heavy with history that can't be shaved away by an Instagram apology. So I brace against fewer holiday invitations and softer voices at family events, against relatives who will now measure me by that one sentence and not the years before it. I can feel the long-term consequences settling like dust on the furniture of our lives. This is not something that will be swept away by a quick explanation. I hold my ground not out of stubborn pride, but because I think the fix isn't performative shame. Still, there's a cold place inside me that wonders if standing firm makes me right or simply harder. And that question follows me to bed each night. She tells me she's leaving when she's 18, I say to Jessica later that night in the kitchen where the light over the table buzzes like an insect, and Madison had already stormed through the door earlier with a folder of printed pages and a look like she was arguing with the world. "I've looked at dorms and shared houses near the community college," she told me in the hallway, breath fast. "I've got a cousin in Columbus who said I could crash for a bit. I'm applying to cafes and tutoring sites." The folder on the table had printouts. A Craigslist listing for a shared room at $650 a month, a map of bus lines, and a spreadsheet of small job postings. She stood there like she'd rehearsed the speech a dozen times. "I'd rather be a free failure than a fake success," she said, like that sentence would be a banner. I watched her, counting off the things that sit quiet in my head when I try to stay practical. She forgets laundry, she panics at paperwork, she sets alarms and then sleeps through them. "Do you know how you're going to handle rent?" I asked, trying to keep my voice flat and useful. $650 a month for a shared room is fine on paper, but add food, a phone plan, bus fares, a deposit, and you're looking at nearly $1,000 first month. Who's covering that? She waved her hand like the math was small. "I'll get a job, I can tutor someone in music, wait tables, I'll save." Her eyes were bright with that dangerous mix of certainty and underestimation. "What shift are you thinking?" I pressed. "Early mornings, 10-hour cafe shifts leave you exhausted. Tutoring pays maybe 11 to 13 an hour depending on qualifications, and you won't land steady clients right away." The hallway light made her face look sharper, as if the edges of her argument could cut. I listed concrete deficits, not as insults but as a checklist of what she'd still need to learn. Laundry routines, basic budgeting, how to cook a single meal without burning the pan, how to schedule a dentist appointment or navigate online banking. "You panic over small tasks," I said, and I could hear the steadiness in my own voice. I wasn't yelling, I was cataloging. "You've lost track of homework because of a closed app or a missed email. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying not to put you in a ditch you can't crawl out of because you learned quitting removes consequences." She slung back that I was controlling, and that control is what made her want to leave, that the structured programs felt like chains. "Life experience is liberation, Dad," she said, like it was a slogan she found on a blog and now believed was her map. I told her the truth as I saw it. Life experience with no safety net is brutal. You can choose failure, but I won't normalize running from obligations. You can't quit the last meaningful program and leave as if we dusted the slate clean. Jessica didn't step in. Her silence has become a thing I notice, like a physical absence. Sometimes she retreats because she can't bear the escalation, sometimes because she thinks I'm the one who needs to enforce lines. Tonight she crossed her arms and watched like someone watching weather patterns, and that quiet felt to Madison like abandonment and to me like resignation. Lily, who'd been doing homework at the kitchen island, finished her pen and asked softly, "Dad, are you going to be okay if she leaves?" Her voice was small and real and cut through everything I'd been saying. I don't know if I did the right thing by holding firm. Part of me hears the shriek of authority in my own words, and part hears a necessary boundary against a lesson I think dangerous. If you always quit and nothing sticks, life will not forgive the habit. I'm terrified that saying no now will push her out sooner and harder, and I'm terrified that saying yes will teach her that responsibility evaporates under pressure. Either way, the cost feels heavy and real, and the clean line I drew in the hallway now looks like a border I might have set between us forever. Sunday settles like a held breath in this house now, and Jessica and I sit at opposite ends of the couch like two islands with the TV glow washing over us, while Lily curls into Jessica's side and reads a book with her foot tucked under her. The living room smells faintly of lemon cleaner and reheated soup. The dishwasher hums in the kitchen like a small motor of domestic life, and the city outside sounds distant: cars, a dog barking, a train breathing by, none of it fixed or comfortable, just ordinary noise filling the space where loud arguments used to be. People have cooled their messages for now, which is its own cold. A cousin rescinded a weekend barbecue invite, said they didn't want kids exposed to tension. And someone missed Madison's birthday because the family get-together turned into a sort of staged neutrality where nobody wanted to pick a side. At the high school reception the week after, Madison flatly refused to attend the family-only event where we were meant to celebrate concert participants. She texted an image of a closed door and a single emoji, and then she didn't come. Those small public refusals have made the home feel like a waiting room for consequences rather than a place of regular weather. I still believe in boundaries the way an old man believes in a roof over his head: necessary, imperfect, and not proof against storms. I don't regret drawing a line when I did, at least not in the abstract. I regret the contour where it cut the life of my daughter, and I know the cost will follow us. I keep telling myself that some lessons are painful because life itself will be more brutal than anything we can design. But I also confess to a fear that my words may have lodged into her like a splinter she'll carry into other relationships. a sentence she will repeat to lovers or bosses and use to measure herself against some small betrayal. The practical choice I refuse to abandon is one I see as lifeline and test at once. I have not agreed to let her quit the violin program that still requires attendance. I don't do it out of spite. I do it because finishing something real, even when it's uncomfortable, has been the one thing in my years of trying that sometimes bent her toward follow-through. The rule is simple, and I've written it down so it isn't a mood swing. Attend weekly lessons, show up for required rehearsals, and complete assignments set by the teacher. Consequences are spelled out plainly: loss of car privileges, fewer discretionary funds, device limits tied to a checklist, small enforceable steps that map behavior to outcome. I'll not shout her down in public, and I will not use the kind of cruel lines that landed in that hallway again. That was a mistake I own even as I justify its intention. My plan is quiet, structured, and documented. The teacher gets copied on attendance notes when nights are missed rehearsals trigger a makeup schedule, and Jessica and I will offer 2 coach sessions a week to help with basic life skills like laundry, scheduling, and budgeting. If she follows through, the restraints ease. If she doesn't, the consequences stand. It's not melodrama, it's a policy. Still, the moral fog is thick. I catch myself imagining her tiny and furious and replaying the moment my words echoed down the hallway, and then I imagine her facing real scarcity and wondering if she'll learn the lesson I wanted to teach or lose trust in the people who should have been steadier. Jessica's silence most nights feels like a verdict and a mercy at once. Lily's small voice across the couch, "Are you sure this is the only way?" pulls at me more than any cousin's texts ever did. Protecting both of my girls has become a game of impossible balances. Then one evening I find a small folded note on the kitchen counter under a glass of water. 3 words inside, not an apology and not a declaration of war: "I need space." The handwriting is hers, tight and slightly slanted, and my first instinct is to map it onto every fear I have, but I hold the paper like a fragile thing anyway. The note could be the start of repair or the outline of a departure. For now it sits between the toaster and the plant, ordinary and heavy. I lie awake late and listen to the hum of the dishwasher and the city moving on outside, thinking about what parenting should be when love is tested, firm enough to teach consequence, soft enough to not break the child you are trying to shape. I know some things might heal and some might not, and I know I cannot unsay the worst of what I said in a hallway. What I can do is try to be steadier, to keep the rules fair and the punishments known, to stop using truth like a sword and start using it like a tool. That choice came from a long, exhausted desire for truth more than from malice. And now I sleep with that complicated honesty beside me, hoping it will be enough to find us back.